Well, hey there, Internet people, and welcome back to Green Wing Gaming. It's Monday again, so it's time for another hobby discussion video, and today we're going to start leaning away from some of the very newcomer-focused videos we've been doing on the channel, start talking about stuff that's a little more applicable to everyone. So today we are going to start by talking about edition changes. We're going to be talking about hard resets, what those terms mean, what they mean for your hobbying journey, and we're going to try to talk about it in a way that will relate to some videos we've got coming up in the next couple of weeks. You know, trying to be like a professional YouTuber and all that stuff. But a big part of why we're going to be talking about this is because as much as I would like to dive into more of the nitty-gritty stuff, focusing on individual units and factions and strats and stuff like that, every time I try to get myself motivated to do those types of videos, the thing that keeps coming back to my mind is that 10th edition is literally right around the corner. Anything I talk to you guys about is going to be irrelevant in like a month or two. So hopefully this can be something that's a little more useful for you guys going forward. And yeah, with all that being said, before we get too deep into it, I would like to just remind you guys that I did just get started on YouTube. This video should mark the start of my second month having the channel live. The channel is so young now that at this point, anything you guys do to interact with it helps out a lot. Even by clicking on this video, you've already done me a huge favor, but I'm hoping that people on the internet can bring themselves to be a little kind, like the video, consider subscribing. I would really appreciate it, and I'd love to talk to you guys down in the comments, because I'm sure some of you are going to have some thoughts. But with all that out of the way, all the shameless self-promotion done for, we're talking about 10th edition and what all of this means for the hobby, so let's just get into it. Okay, so we're talking about edition changes and hard resets, so let's talk about what that means. What is an edition change? Well, the cynical answer is that an edition change is when Games Workshop has decided they need to make more money and they decide to slightly alter the rules so they can sell you a new rulebook. I think a more accurate definition is when an edition is starting to show some wear and tear, they're starting to show some real systemic issues with the rule set. Games Workshop will decide to start a new edition, and that way they can make some fundamental changes, you know, that go beyond the FAQs, the balanced data slates. They can do more than just slightly tweak the factions, and they can actually tweak the fabric of the game itself. And as for what that means for you guys, anything that's in any of the 9th edition rulebooks, anything that's in any of the FAQs is about to be completely null and void. None of it matters. As soon as 10th edition drops, as soon as it is officially live, anyone who tries to tell you, oh, but in this 9th edition FAQ, tell them to shut up, because nothing in the 9th edition FAQs matter anymore once 10th edition is here. That's just how it is. It is a full stop resetting of the rules. Only what is in the 10th edition rulebook will be in effect. Now, a change of edition does not always mean a full hard reset. And so what is the difference? An edition change means a change to the core rulebook. There's going to be a new core rulebook with probably new mechanics, or at least a change in mechanics to the game. A hard reset completely invalidates all of the codexes, your specific army books for Warhammer, and that's what's coming. 10th edition, we have been told, is another hard reset. Similar to the change from 7th edition to 8th edition, that's what's going to happen here. All of the codexes are going out the window. From what I've been hearing, I'm pretty sure this is true, that we are going to be getting indexes. We are going to be getting books called indexes that provide generic, they provide a playable rule set for whatever units you want to bring in your army. There are going to be rules for the different units of the game. If I had to guess, I would say that the indexes are going to look something like what we saw in the 8th edition indexes. 9th edition didn't have any because 9th edition wasn't a hard reset. You could just keep using your codexes. But with 10th edition, they're probably going to do what they did at the start of 8th, where there's going to be an index just for the Space Marines, there's going to be an index for the rest of the Imperium, an index for the Xenos factions, and then another index for your Codex, for your Chaos factions, sorry. Yeah, so there's probably going to be about 4 indexes. They're going to have rules for all of the units in the game, or at least the ones that are not Legends choices. How they're going to handle Legends choices, I really don't know. There's probably going to be like a PDF they put out at some point. It would be my guess, but I don't know. I do not have any insider information on this. But yeah, so to look a little bit back on the history of Warhammer, the 10th edition reset will be the 3rd of its kind. There's been a few others. From what I've been told, the change from 2nd edition to 3rd was a hard reset. That was when they really started to formalize the rules, and they established, you know, a really hard difference between 2nd edition and 3rd. And then from 3rd all the way to 7th, and this is stuff I actually have had first-hand experience with, 3rd all the way to 7th were more or less the same, just with some extra stuff tacked on, where Games Workshop was more or less trying to fix any problems in a given edition by just, like, taping on some new extra stuff, hoping that it would all balance out in the end. It had a mixed track record. It didn't always work. In fact, I would argue it usually didn't work. It made things really complicated, but we loved the hobby anyway. And then 8th edition came along, and there was just like a hard reset. They fundamentally rebuilt the game from the ground up. And I'm guessing that a fair amount of you watching this probably came in around 8th edition. There was a huge influx of new players, or a huge return of older players who had just skipped out on the last few editions. So yeah, 8th and 9th really were a influx of people returning back to the hobby, which was great to see. But I do think that some people have been talking about how short the editions are getting, that there's less and less time passing between edition changes. That's true. If you're watching this video and you want my take on that, I'm not concerned about that at all. If I were you, I wouldn't be either. Because if you weren't here for the older editions, you probably wouldn't be able to remember that Games Workshop was not great about addressing people's complaints in past editions. If there was something genuinely wrong with the game, you just kind of had to wait for the next edition whenever they felt like it and hope that it fixed what your problem with it was. So with these new editions coming more frequently, problems in a given edition are going to get addressed more quickly. We might not always like how they're addressed, but they will be addressed. So that I'm going to take that as a positive, take that as a win. And I hope you guys do too. So that talks a little bit about what an edition change is, what a hard reset is, and we've kind of talked about what it's going to mean for your short-term hobbying. What that is just, like I said, your rulebooks are going out the window. You're going to have to get an index, and you're going to have to spend a little bit of time reading. But if you're into Warhammer, I'm guessing that's not a problem for you. Of all the things that might deter you about Warhammer, having to read a couple new rules probably isn't the thing that's going to scare you away. So that's what it means in the short term. Long term, it doesn't mean much, because the things were going to change anyway. You know, even if it was just FAQs and data slates, the game changes, at this point, it changes like every 6 months. But yeah, so that's what the edition changes are. That's what it's going to mean in your short-term future. Talking a little bit, more about how this is going to relate to our upcoming videos. This I think, is going to be a huge relief for hobby burnout. Hobby burnout is what we're going to be talking about next week. And I think the new edition is going to be great for that. I think we're really going to, because what hobby burnout even is just the fact that playing the same game with the same rules, the same scenarios, constantly just painting the same units, it can get a little tiring. It can get a little boring. If it's always the same all the time, it can just kind of wear you out. Like, wow, am I really doing this again? And because at a certain point, the dice are only going to change so much, and most of your games are going to turn out roughly the same if you're playing the same people over and over again. So I think the edition change is going to be great to relieve that a little bit. Things are going to get changed up. Factions are probably going to get noticeably different. Not just a little bit. You're probably going to see some major tweaks in how factions work. We've already seen with Leagues of Votann, they're getting a huge rework. They're getting, I hate to say, they're getting nerfed pretty hard. Not that they didn't need it, but I'm just saying they are in fact getting nerfed pretty hard. And they're going to work completely differently in the new edition. So that's going to keep it fresh, give you something new to look at, which hopefully will help you enjoy the hobby a little bit more. And if I'm being honest, it might help you just chill out a little bit in terms of scrambling to get new units to keep up with the meta. The meta is going to be completely reset, so who knows? Your current collection might be really solid at the start of the new edition. So if you've been scrambling to keep up, maybe this will give you a break. And give you a little bit of time to just look at what you already have and see how it works in the new edition. This is one of those areas where change really can be a good thing, and it can give you a little bit of a breather. So I'm hoping that's how that's going to shake out when in terms of hobby burnout. The other thing that we're probably going to see a little bit of, I would wager it's going to be a little bit harder for power gamers in the immediate first few months of 10th edition. That's more hope than any actual facts that I can point to, but just the fact that a lot of the army rules that people, it's going to be a little bit harder for people to come at you with those sweat lord, try hard, oh, I want to win at all costs lists that we definitely see on the tournament scene. I'm not a competitive player, but I've definitely been down at my local Games Workshop and ended up playing a guy who was prepping for a tournament and brought the most ridiculous busted list, and I was like, dude, why would you bring this to a casual shop game? But anyways, that's a whole other conversation. We're going to talk a little bit more about that 2 weeks from now when we're talking about power gaming. But yeah, I would wager in the new edition, with no codexes to rely on, it's going to be a little bit harder to bring the super power gaming lists. I'm sure someone will figure out a way. Again, referencing the beginning of 8th, the last time we had a hard reset, you did see people who would just bring, oh, I'm going to bring, Kaldor Drago from the Grey Knights with Guilliman from the Ultramarines and Azrael from the Dark Angels, and they're all going to be buffing Imperial Knights for some reason. And these were referred to as soup lists, which they were kind of the scourge of 8th edition for a huge chunk of that version of the rules. I wager that's probably not going to be as big a thing with some of the changes I've been looking at. The fact that sub-faction rules aren't going to be a thing, you're not going to be able to rely on that as much. I think it's going to be a little bit harder to pull off some of the cheesier combos. Again, I'm sure someone will prove me wrong and find a way to power game, but it won't be as easy as it's been. Some people, it won't be as simple as, oh, pick up this codex, find the most broken stuff, bam, done. They're actually going to have to work for it a little bit. It's going to have to take a much wider angle lens to try and power game your way through Warhammer. And then the last thing I want to talk to you guys about is the list building, because list building is going to look a little bit different. From what I've been seeing, and by all means I'm sure you'll let me know if I'm wrong in the comments, it looks like they're going to be getting rid of the Force org chart. And if I'm being honest with you, I don't know how I feel about it. I'm not certain it's a great idea. I do think it's going to make building your army a little wonkier, and potentially is going to... That might be the thing that proves me wrong about the power gaming thing, because now all of a sudden people are going to be able to, oh, I'm bringing nothing but fast attack choices. And, a single HQ. And so you might see some really weird lists that skew really into one thing and start to make the game look a little wonkier than what I'm used to. But again, who knows? Maybe I'm wrong, if I'm right, maybe that'll be a good thing. Maybe a lot of people will like that. So it's the one thing I'm a little hesitant about. It's got me a little ooh, I don't know what this is going to look like in the first few months, with people just bringing nothing but land speeders, or bringing nothing but swooping hawks from the Eldar or something like that. He's bringing nothing but Reaver bikes for your Drukhari, stuff like that. We'll have to see what that, if anyone ends up doing that, and obviously I haven't seen the final version of the 10th edition rules, so maybe they've got things in place for that. Off the top of my head, they might be going with like the rule of 3, where you can never bring more than 3 of one unit. That would be a pretty easy way to rein that in, and so maybe we don't need the Force org chart. Maybe I'm completely wrong. It's been known to happen from time to time. But as I said, it's the one area of this where I'm maybe less than optimistic. But other than that, I'm actually really looking forward to 10th edition. Right away, some of the changes that I've seen, I'm actually really on board with. You know, getting rid of like the OBSEC rule, objective secured, and just replacing it with an objective control stat, so you no longer have to do like, oh, I've got this unit on an objective. Oh, but I've got a troops unit, so they're OBSEC. Oh, but I'm playing Custodes, so they're super OBSEC. It got a little confusing and just a lot to keep track of, so I'm a huge fan of that change. There's several others that I'm really excited about, but we're not going to get too deep into the nitty-gritty of that. I'm going to hold off until I actually have the rules in my hands to talk too much about the rules changes. But other than that, we have more or less gotten to the end of what I wanted to talk about. Hopefully, this has given you an idea of what to expect in the coming edition change. Maybe if this is your first one, you're not so worried about it, assuming you were worried at all. And yeah, that's about all I wanted to cover. We're going to go in a little more in-depth on some of the stuff in some upcoming videos, but until that time, please do let me know what you're thinking down in the comments. I would love to know, are you guys looking forward to 10th edition? Are you dreading it? You know, are you completely indifferent? Let me know in the comments. I would love to hear your thoughts, because I'm sure there's someone out there that has thought of something that I haven't thought of, and I would love to hear about it. So, other than that, if you've made it this far in the video, thank you so much for watching. I do appreciate it. Again, consider liking, consider subscribing, but if you've made it this far, you've already done me a solid, so I really appreciate it. One more time, I would love to hear your thoughts down in the comments below. I would love to see you over on the next video. But in the meantime, happy wargaming.
Onward to glory!